Dear friends, families of children with cerebral palsy, we are continuing our educational effort on helping you with the understanding of the current situation, cerebral palsy and coronavirus. So the thing that I wanted to cover today, and I will try to be relatively short and compact about it, is the conversation about the risks and behavior response. So what is the epidemic thing or the pandemic thing is that you are suddenly being exposed to much greater risks of potentially dangerous and even deadly disease that you didn't even know about few weeks before. So suddenly your personal risks, the risks of your family and especially the elders, the risks of your children affected by cerebral palsy, suddenly those risks go up. Now, what is the behavior response to this? How do we deal with this situation? What do we do? So, first point that we need to understand is a little bit of the history and how we are wired. Right? So it's a hardwiring thing because mankind, through all the years and multiple generations of evolution has been facing risks. And we are the descendants of the people who survived through this risk because they did a relatively appropriate assessment of this. The first thing that we have to acknowledge about ourselves that we are mainly the descendants of the cowards, not of the brave men and women and so on, or like reckless ones. We are the descendants of the cowards. People who preferred to overreact if there was some danger, the noise from the bush, right, or the whatever. So it could have been a lion or it could have been just a bird. But generally, those who overreacted and escaped, they had the better chances of survival, right? So that's why, to a great extent, we are the descendants of the cowards. That means that when we hear the negative news, we have a tendency to overreact. That's the first point. The second thing, which is difficult, is that, in the original human development, there was a very direct link between the danger or perception of danger and response. Something happens, you flee, fight or flight. There wasn't such thing as, continuous bombardment. See, the thing which always completely transfixed me when I was watching things like Animal Planet or whatever, especially, I did it a lot with my daughter, is that, they show some savanna footage, and then there is a lion chasing a gazelle, and then gazelle manages to escape, for example. And then, 10 seconds later, the lion goes one way, and then the 10 seconds later they show the same gazelle, and this gazelle is just chewing the grass. The stress is already gone. She doesn't live through it, she doesn't make any anticipation. The lion showed up, she did her best to escape, and then, now the threat is gone, it's back to business. So the original ancient humans were much more like that. The threat was in the fixed window of time, and then it was immediate action. Now everything is distorted. Media, friends, social circle, now especially with the social media and so on, WhatsApps, Vibers and whatever else, messengers, everything is sharing this coronavirus thing and so on and so on and so forth, and then the governments and everything is just putting the scare factor through the roof. So, what happens? Of course, you get fearful, you get tense, and you get into this situation when the fear becomes relatively paralyzing. You kind of start just praying, let me live through this as soon as possible. I'm just waiting until this whole paranoia and this whole danger and so on is over. Is this a productive approach? Probably not. And let's try to understand why and what we can actually do in this situation and currently with the CP chain. So first thing which is important to understand is really to get the clear idea where we are with this entire coronavirus thing. I'll be very simple there. So, because you obviously heard the numbers, right? The numbers are that, say, every year that's 600,000 people die of regular flu worldwide. 600,000. Nobody calls any major whatever alert or anything like this. Life goes as usual. Now the total number of, by the time the total number of mortalities from this coronavirus thing reached 6,000, the world has been all closed. Say, wow, why is that? What's the whole problem? Is it really an accurate response? And because like the average age of the people who passed away and died from this thing was like 79.5 years. It's like almost 80 years old. So for this to understand the proportion between the total number and the actual danger, we have to get the distinction between the two ideas, crude and case. So crude risk is the one that is the total for the population. And the case risk is the one which happens in the instant of the specific disease. What does it mean? So, for example, like with the flu, the percentage of the population that gets the flu on average is about 10%. So 1 person out of 10 or 100 out of 1,000 get this thing every year. But the actual case mortality rate for the flu is 1 out of 1,000 for those who have contracted it. So that's really the total situation, right? So that's the thing. So therefore, if we take the total population, then with the flu, we've got the mortality rate, which is like 1 out of 10,000. But today, with this coronavirus thing, even in the countries when there is like full alert, instead of 10%, instead of 100 people out of 1,000, we have maybe 1 person out of 1,000 who is sick, who has kind of conducted the coronavirus. So, effectively, it's like the prevalence, the percentage in population, the crude rate of coronavirus now is like 100 times less than the one for the flu. But you should ask, okay, the crude rate, the total prevalence is low, 100 times less, but the case rate, what is the case risk if the person has contracted it? What's the relative situation compared to the flu? And that's where the situation is not so good. So what we see today is that on average, I'm not going to go into the details, but roughly speaking, one can consider that the case risk for the coronavirus thing is 5 to 10 times greater. So the prevalence is 100 times less. So that's why the total numbers of the people who passed away from this thing are very low. But on the other hand, the actual risk is, say, let's round it up, 10 times greater than with the regular flu. So that's why the total situation is like this. If this coronavirus thing stops now, with just 1 person out of 1,000, as the crude rate, your personal risks are like next to nothing. So in fact, you might as well relax and say, hey, these risks are so low, I'd rather sit home and whatever, watch the movies and live my regular life as much as possible. That's very much a possibility. And maybe with time this whole virus itself is going to cool down and in a few months, maybe there is a vaccine, maybe there's something, so there is logic to this approach. The thing is that what is the whole big fuss around, right? The whole big fuss around is that this thing might potentially spread. Some people estimated that if today it's 1 person out of 1,000, it has the potential to reach as much as 700 out of 1,000. So that's a very different situation, right? So if this coronavirus thing is going to be 700 out of 1,000, so that would be like 7 times the crude rate of the flu, and on top of this it has 10 times or 5 times or 10 times the case rate. So it has its own mortality, which is 10 times worse, right? So then what we are having? We are having potentially the situation which is going to be 70 times worse, especially for certain more vulnerable groups of populations, than the regular flu. So that is a kind of thing that defines the logic behind the situation. So your personal position in this particular situation can vary from anywhere, like I trust the governments and then trust their health authorities that they would stop those risks at their footsteps, and like those extreme measures would help, so I don't have to worry about myself, I don't have to do anything myself. That's a plausible logic, right? But at the same time, well, there is this concern, there is this pessimistic scenario. Well, for example, in Britain, they've really been discussing it, right? So they've been discussing it in Germany, that it could be that within a space of few months, anywhere like 70% of the world's population could be affected, especially if we talk about the sort of the Western countries, right? So they could be affected by this thing. At 70 times the risks, that's really a very different situation. So you can see today this spread from the super low risk to the actually much higher risk. That's the kind of big spread that we are in. And the point is, what to do in this kind of situation? What kind of behavior response you should do? Because on the one hand, 70 times the increase of risk, it could be paralyzing, right? So you see like complete dismissal, the governments will take care of it, to the complete panic, wow, it's 70 times worse than the flu, we are all gonna die. So let me cool you down on this. Even if it's 70 times this coronavirus thing, as if it's 70 times potentially could be the crude and the total crude and case rate risk level of the regular flu, it's still not a plague, right? It's like very far from those numbers. So you can relax, right? Mankind is not going to be wiped out by this particular thing. But still the chance of what, the choice of what to do, and whether you are praying or whether you are investing into the personal risk minimization, this is really your choice. And in that sense, my point is very simple, is that really by doing the extra investment, by doing the extra work now, you don't have anything to lose, you only have to gain. First, by concentrating on work instead of fears, on like learning your child better, meeting your child better, like organizing like your observations of what the child is capable of and how he's like living his everyday life through the closed lens, that's a unique learning opportunity for you. Finally, you have a chance to get out of the rat race, out of this hamster wheel, kind of slow down and say, hey, let me observe what my child actually wants to do. How at which kind of rate and pace she lives her life. What are her true favorites? What are the things that, what is the tempo of life? What are the actions and inactions that she wants to do? And this is just the thing that you never had the time to do before. So this connection with your child is a unique opportunity now. So if anything, this total risk and the lockdown and so on, it's an opportunity for you to meet your child. That's one thing. The second thing is, don't forget that when you are passively waiting, you're getting anxious. When you're using this opportunity for learning, that's fantastic. Because at the time of crisis, your brain becomes a lot more effective as well. It's kind of learns things much quicker. So in that sense, we have to get the right kind of management on what kind of inheritance, behavioral inheritance we got from our ancestors. Right? So you see, on the one hand, our ancestors passed on the genes and whatever their pre-wiring into being easily scared, because we are the descendants of the cowards, right? And that's why when this bombardment goes, the fear and the anxiety easily kicks up. But on the other hand, the same ancestors passed the extra sharpening of your brain and learning abilities when there is trouble. So my point is, not only you can learn, meet your child better, you can actually do the self-education and learning through this period of time. It's a great opportunity. And then, of course, the central point, when you're hiding and escaping versus the working. Fact is, when you work systematically, when you work with the child, not only you meet them, but the time passes quicker for you as well. Because there's really few things which are worse than just passively waiting. And there is only that little that you can do by kind of trying to escape. With entertainment and so on, within a few days, it's kind of will stop working. So the thing is that, to a great extent, I'll be saying the banalities, but sometimes it's the banalities, they are the truest things. Whenever there is a crisis, there is opportunity. The thing is that now in this crisis with the increased risks, the situation is you can just passively wait and say, hope that this whole thing stops and life goes back to be as usual. Or you can run mental scenarios. Wow, this thing could be really dangerous, much more dangerous than the regular flu. Then you can drive yourself crazy and then invest only in prayers and whatever amulets and whatever other things, and just hope that things are going to pass you by. Or instead of these two extreme unproductive strategies, you can use the productive strategy and say, hey, I will invest in the personal risk minimization. What would be the greatest health capacity that I can give to myself and I can give to my child? And then on top of this, you can meet your child, really meet and observe what's happening, get the extra goggles and lens on yourself to start observing what your child is doing. You have nowhere to rush anymore. Then you can learn a lot better yourself, right? Get the extra depth of learning, use the current extra sharpening of your brain, and of course you can really get the investment into the everyday work. And that would be my point, that what we are specializing in, we can give you those tools. The tools of how to observe your child, the tools of how to improve their respiratory capacity, the tools of how to take care of your own health as the caregiver, which is also a unique opportunity for that. And at the same time, to give you the strategy for the hands-on work, which is going to be the double win-win. It's going to give the extra work for your child, get the extra health assets for your child, and at the same time, it's going to help you in passing the time quicker, Plus, it's going to be this positive thing. You will know that you're not just wasting your time, you're actually investing it, and then it's going to be the right kind of momentum. So the time would be spent correctly and with a certain sense of the self-satisfaction, which is really important now when your social contacts are limited and when the whole life feels so much more constrained. So I hope that this is helpful, and I would be really happy if you would be sharing these videos and kind of getting the extra subscription to our channels and information. Thank you very much, and there is a lot more of the helpful things coming following the current situation, how to help the children with the cerebral palsy and help you understanding cerebral palsy and the coronavirus. Thank you.